Oh, never mind. Yes, nice. Hey, wait. I like this service. Thank you.
Will you
Thank
also
you.
do the, no, you will not take notes.
No.
No. Um,
Come on.
John Levine is always such a nice guy.
Oh, he takes very good notes, doesn't he? Thank
Yeah, yeah, fine. I bought one last week. Um, Let me show you the purchase process afterward. Let me show you the purchase process. See this?
Right.
Those are my bids.
Okay.
I raised.
Jokes aside.
Modern,
Hello. Hello. Good morning. Oh, that's creepy. Wow. So I should turn this off. So good morning. This is SML session on today's Wednesday morning in Madrid. I hope you are all in the right room, whether virtually or in person. Thank you, John, for doing some notes for us. If somebody else can help out, that would be great as well. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, with that, let's get started. So I'm Alexei. This is Arnd, my co-chair. So I'm projecting slides, show slides. You want to go through chair slides? You want to go through chair slides?
welcome, and next slide. Where do we have this click here? Note well, as a reminder, blah, blah, blah. Participating, aware of any contribution covered by patents. You're not. As a participant, you acknowledge that audio and video will be recorded. Personal information that you provide will be handled in accordance, and you will be nice to everyone. Treat colleagues with respect, speak slowly, and limit the use of slang. Use arguments and good engineering judgment. And the goal here is to find the best solution for the whole internet. And in particular, structured mail here. This session is being recorded. We have a Meet Echo session. Everyone has clicked in, I assume. We have a note taker, John Levine. Okay, fine. So we have a note taker. Excellent. Next.
Yeah. And just a reminder, if you are on site, please make sure that you log in both for record tracking and for room allocation in the future. Please log in with on-site tool if you're local.
Good. 5 minutes for administrivia. Then we'll take 40 minutes to talk about the main document. There are a few open issues. I have, shocker, read the draft, and what I see as open are mostly nits, so 40 minutes should be enough. Next. After that, trust and security. Chairs should have issued an adoption call in the past 4 months, didn't. We want to issue an adoption call now. There is new stuff there. We have 20 minutes. The draft has Hans-Jörg's name on it, but I did the most recent editing. After that, 20 minutes for structured vacation notices and only a little time for any other business. We'll see how much time actually is left at the end. Wait, this is wrong. I made the wrong slide.
That's okay. I did tell you. So, all right. When I saw this, I thought that was a kind of a funny reminder. So, base back. No, this is this close. This requires. Are you happy for me just to do?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. How?
Good to go? Yes? I'm waiting for you.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Perfect.
You go.
So, good morning, everybody here in the room in Madrid, in wonderful Madrid, and everybody remote in whichever time zone you may be. This is structured email again. And yeah, we will start with what we call the core draft, lining out the main things underpinning structured emails, positioning within an email. And yeah, there is, first of all, one news in terms of example implementation. So there is now a fork of Thunderbird Mobile. So fork means that it's not meant to be a permanent one, but hopefully something Thunderbird Mobile people might merge into the main thing at some point. It's actually as a test thing on Google Play, even if you want to play around with it. We also want to give an APK file out. So because some people ask that are not on, don't have Play Store on their phone. So yeah, that will also be there. There will be some screenshots on the next slide just to give you an idea what it does. In terms of the draft itself, mostly what has been done, and I apologize for doing that very late before the meeting due to time conflicts, was adding to the draft things that were discussed in Bangkok or in some parts proposals for that. Not for everything we will see, unfortunately, but I try to focus on the most important ones that are probably the most ones to discuss. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the Thunderbird Mobile thing. So just to give you an idea what you see here, so this is actually the compose dialog. On the left-hand side, you have a web browser, which I think is Chrome on Android. And this is, I think, an Apple Music website here. And if you do share that to this fork of Thunderbird, you will actually see something different than what you would see if you share that to the Thunderbird mobile actual release, which would basically just put a URL in there. And so you see here is sort of a link preview, but it's just looks like a link preview. It's actually you could call it a smart link preview, because underneath there is actually the structured data, which basically Apple nicely even already embeds within the website due to being, due to wanting to be crawled by web crawlers. And we basically put this data within that structured email. So if I would now send this email to you and you would have the sufficient client, you wouldn't just be stuck to the Apple Music URL, but your client actually would even be able to understand that this is Y Viva España album from Manolo Escobar, and you could match it with your local collection of music or with a Spotify account or whatever you want. Next slide, please. So these are two different examples that are more from the receiver side. So on the left-hand side, that's actually a genuine New York Times cooking newsletter. And in this example, we just claim as if it would already have structured data inside. The trick we do here is basically we do fetch the structured data within the inbox, which obviously is not the best way to do it, but we just do it here for the example. So basically the mail is underneath, and if you click a button, you basically see the recipes within that mail. What could you do with that? So you as a receiver could selectively share certain of those content pieces with others. So you don't just need to forward the full newsletter. But of course, you can also do stuff like adding that to your recipe app, to your shopping app, or I don't know, passing that to your cooking AI assistant, which will set up your, I don't know, microwave. On the right-hand side, this is actually a genuine Apple code for, let's say, you get it when you want to log in somewhere and you need to have this additional second factor code to enter. This is currently a normal HTML email, which you have to manually click into. Since that also doesn't unfortunately yet contain structured data by itself, we basically wrote a little bit of a script which does pretend it does. And so you see the rendering on top with this nice copy paste button. So instead of just needing to mark the code down there, you just can click that button and then the effect on the bottom appears. So it's a little bit hard to see in that screenshot here. So this is a dynamic thing that happens when you press a button up there. And obviously also the rendering is not very nice yet, but I think the idea is clear. All right, so far to that. And then let's get into the actual draft. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 broad areas of discussion that are still open. And the first thing is IANA registrations and IANA registries. I hope everybody is, is at full attention now. No, we discussed it in Bangkok already. I think it's not necessarily super controversial. It's it is actually a little bit more tricky in terms of writing that in the draft than I thought. So I a little bit underestimated it. I would actually be very grateful if somebody could come to me and probably point me to, because I looked at some other drafts to find some inspiration and I found it quite differently done in certain places. And so I hesitated at that moment to go on because I didn't want to follow an example which probably some people will say is not a good one. So I think this is more like a doing thing if anybody can give some advice here. And I also know somebody told at the last IETF that there is the IANA Biz currently going on, doing some update on IANA practices. Unfortunately, I've not been there yesterday in the session. So if anybody has some concrete pointer, like if there is something to look at, I'd be happy to do that. So this is still a to-do to add to the draft.
Yeah, hi. There is an IANA desk with helpful IANA people sitting at it. Talk to them.
I know. I did that already in Bangkok, actually.
Okay.
I'm in that process, but still, I mean, they don't know the subject matter so good. So I struggled a little bit, or it took a while to get them into the idea. So if I would find a person in the middle who both knows a little bit like how IANA stuff worked and how email works.
Yeah, my advice would be write something bad, and then somebody else will say, "Oh, that's terrible. Here's what you should have written."
So that's anyway my fallback strategy, but I skipped it for this draft version. Okay. So. Thanks.
Clarifying question.
Yep.
Why 2 registries? Remind me.
Sure. I just wanted to get to that. So the idea is actually to have 2 different registries. Not even sure if the second one is strictly a registry by its name. The first one obviously is for looking up for helping clients to look up schemas they might find useful to support. So it's more like a resource to find out, okay, these are schemas that are around in the email sphere and I as a client should probably look into and consider building into my client. So one can argue if that is a strict necessity, but it's probably a good central point to maintain for a list of these things. And obviously you see here we chose in our charter already schema.org as such, as something like a base vocabulary. We also choose to have a small vocabulary for email-specific concepts like the structured vacation notice we come to later, but there might be other people inventing their own specific schema used in structured email, and those might also want to register here. And they might want to have other clients find that out. The second registry would actually be the description of those email-related concepts, because as I said, that is a vocabulary which sort of the IETF maintains. So it would be good to have a small documentation page for that kind of vocabulary. This is probably IANA-wise also a little more non-standard because it's not a classic registry in that sense, but it's more like a little bit of a documentation web page. But so I was told so far that this will also work with IANA, but it might be a little bit more, a little bit more work with them to, define what's the procedural aspects of that. Does it explain everything you wanted to know?
So just to confirm my understanding. So the first registry is a registry of registries. So it kind of points to various places where you can find specific schemas.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And you see it basically in the table.
I understood it differently. The first is for things that apply to more than email, and the second is for things that only make sense within email.
That is both correct and a little bit incorrect, maybe. I'll explain.
fun.
No, I'll explain. I mean, you were not wrong in that sense.
Okay, try again then.
So obviously schema.org is something, so all of the ones in the first registry might of course be used anywhere else as well. Yeah. So the idea is just people can, and there might be even many more vocabularies than those. Yeah? And you might be fine using them also within your emails. However, the chance that other email clients will be able to render them is probably lower because you just don't know that the schema might pop up in emails, right? So in order to inform the developers of those clients, this registry will give you a list of vocabularies which people intend to use or do use within structured email contexts, but not solely within that context, obviously. Okay? And the second thing is basically the detailed description of the second row here. So of the specifically maintained vocabulary within this group or within the IETF.
And also commenting on something else you kind of said, but I hope you didn't mean it. You said the registry for clients to download. I assume we're not recommending this will be downloaded in real time. But
No, did I say
okay.
that?
This is more for users,
To look
for
up.
developers of clients
Yeah, exactly.
to look up. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think what would be the good feedback from the group would be if anybody disagrees with overall idea as such, which, however, from the previous discussion, I think is not as such controversial. What is open to do, I think, is the actual doing of putting this into IANA legalese or IANA formulation, which I think we don't need to strictly discuss here. I will come up with a proposal, and then people can do their job in commenting that. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is actually a list of things. So we have separate slides for all these four in the following. I think this is the thing or the most important thing to finalize for that draft to be finally mature, let's say, because there is still some certain open questions in terms of how exactly to do certain things within the MIME tree. And I think this is strictly in the core of SML and its interoperability, because it's actually where the senders place the data and how the clients interpret it. So I think it's quite important to go through again some of these. And I would say next slide, let's start with the first one. All right, so we had that discussion, that is actually something going through all the SML working group discussions since the very beginning. It's a little bit the question of, do we need a specific body part header designating this as a machine readable or a body part which an email client should only process by itself and not show it to the user. So there's actually other use cases of this beyond SML. You might remember this windmail dot file you have sometimes on your email, or encryption keys which are sent, which if your email client doesn't understand it will confuse users, these kind of things. And as we have seen actually by the experiment we have been doing by sending SML structured emails to current email clients, in some cases SML stuff might still show up like that, which is a little bit disturbing probably for existing users. So the idea is actually to add some sort of a body part header in general. So that would actually not be an SML thing, most likely, even though it's currently here in the draft for discussion. But I think last time at Bangkok, Michael Richardson, for instance, said he might be interested in doing that as a very small draft, for instance, maybe in MailMaint or something like that. So we would need that actually to happen in order to include it or reference it here from the draft. Yeah. So the idea is basically to have for the body part a certain new header field, like it's here content purpose, but that's subject to discussion. It was something I just make up, which clearly tells the client, okay, this is actually something where structured email or structured data will be inside. And yeah, so that was discussed and I added it here for the moment. There is actually a second thing I clarified in the draft. And so there was also this proposal last time that there might be cases in which the body part with structured data might just not just be application LD JSON by itself, but it may be either signed or encrypted JSON LD, one candidate being for that Josie-based JSON web signatures or JSON web encryption. So the question would a little bit be how to deal with that in the draft. And now I added some wording where I said, like, if that content purpose machine readable is there and the actual media type of the body part is either application LD plus JSON, which would be like the default case, or some other body part or some other media type from which application LD JSON could be derived by the client in some way, then it should be treated like application LD JSON. Yeah. And actually in discussion yesterday, I think with Philip, there came up also the idea of maybe doing it a little bit different even, instead of doing this distinction, considering a dedicated like wrapper media type for SML. However, I came up in discussion with some backdoor offset, which I don't remember now. Philip, if you can come to my help and still remember it, it would be great. So that might also be something to consider alternatively.
Can one of you or both of you elaborate what the wrapper idea is then?
Yeah. So, do you want, Philip? Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Philip from Apple. Yeah, I think this, we briefly chatted about this. I think I'm kind of walking it back, from our discussion. It just kind of came up as a way to maybe extend this more easily in the future. Like, right now, Josie seems like the way to go for signing or encrypting parts. But, in the future, if we want to use some other type instead of JSON for whatever reason, we want to switch to like XML or something crazy, instead of adding a new application type that would need to be recognized, we can use the same one. And so the wrapper idea would be like, I guess, yeah, so I guess, okay, ignore the XML part. That's just so assuming we continue to use JSON, right? Like you could have a top level thing that has a type in the JSON, and then the actual payload would be another property of the JSON. But yeah, that came up very briefly. I think the main argument against that would be like clients wouldn't be able to tell just from the body structure or something if they even wanted that part. You would have to actually download the part to check the type to see if it's something you understood. So yeah, I think it came up, but I don't think I'm supporting it now.
All right, thanks for elaborating. Any further comments on this? Daniel?
Hi. Yeah, I don't understand why the wrapper type would be useful for further flexibility. I mean, if you can't, we've done this a lot in email where we've like built in extension points and then nobody ever builds the extension point. And so it's always just version equals 1, or it's, and then when someone comes up with a new idea, and then of course they register it separately. Let's keep one place to have the extension type, which is the MIME type, which we know how to deal with. And if people come up with other ideas, they can register those and go forward with them, and you can handle them as you would. So I don't think a separate wrapper type actually builds us much. I want to also say on this discussion about signed and encrypted parts, I think it's a bad idea to do signed and encrypted parts as subparts of an email message. Unless you're expecting the semantics of the subpart to be something radically different than the message itself, You want the message itself. If you're going to be signing the message before you send it, sign the message and have the subpart be part of that. If you look at what's written in draft IETF LAMP's E2 email guidance, which is soon to be RSC 9787, I believe, it explicitly says, make sure that the whole message has the same cryptographic properties. So we already know how to sign and encrypt emails. We've known that for 30 years. Please don't sign and encrypt some subpart of the email and have it have different cryptographic properties than the rest of the message.
So thanks. To shortly comment on where the idea came from of having this additional level of signature. Basically, I think one use case for that is that not in every situation the sender of the email might be the same person, being the issuer of the structured data. For instance, in a white label setting, when you have like maybe a hotel that wants to sign, the reservation, but it uses a third-party hotel booking system in order to send the message. Yeah? And also technically, not always every party might be able to control each level or the whole, the signature thing of the whole message. So the idea was here a little bit to give this a little bit of flexibility. And there were also some discussions on it might be useful to have the ability to apply multiple signatures on a certain piece of data, which I'm not sure. I mean, it's probably possible with standard email encryption, but I'm actually not 100% sure if somebody can comment on that, but it's certainly possible, I think, with Josie.
Then me. Two comments on that. Do we really need to care about signatures in SML? If we get signatures free from schema or from JSON LD, then fine. Then we don't need to spend time on it. But do we really need to spend time on it?
Mhm.
We have signatures from email. We may have signatures from JSON LD. That should be enough. This seems to me to be us looking for more work to do and deferring working group last call misfeature. Second, the MIME header might have a related purpose, namely if it might say whether a message can be auto-archived if the server was able to process it automatically. Yes, in some cases, no, if the sender thinks that a human needs to look at it anyway. That's it.
So the second would be a message level header and not a body part header? Of a top level header.
I agree. The second would be a message level header, yes.
Just for clarification. Okay. Second for clarification, so for your Josie comment, what do you think would be additional work here beyond that? I mean, would we need to define anything more, or wouldn't it be just subject?
It needs maybe half a page or a page of text. Do we really need that, or can we shorten?
What kind of elaboration do you think would need, in addition to what is written in the draft right now?
It needs what's in the draft right now and discussion of that.
Okay.
And also don't forget DKG's point about protecting part of a message with a signature has different properties.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is a point that the JSON LD might come from a third party which wants signatures. If that is the case, however, then we should get those signatures for free from the third party. It shouldn't be part of the mail. We deal with JSON LD in mail, and that shouldn't have a reason for extra signatures.
All right. Any further comments? Otherwise,
Next page.
Yep. All right. So this is also something we, and it relates actually to a little bit to what Arndt just said. So we have this notion of full representation in the draft for a whole time already. And one of these ideas was, well, one core idea behind that was being able to say or to distinguish if a message most of the time is something which an email client can consider without any doubt to be something completely machine readable and processable without having any doubts that there is some information that might get lost for the machine, which a human would need to be involved in to read or comprehend. However, there was a little bit of an unclarity actually so far in the draft, because basically it was assuming that, you know, there would be probably something like a single multi-part alternative, like with, you know, text HTML human readable and then the machine readable part, and that's it, which of course then everything would be fine. However, I mean, in theory, or probably also in at least a certain fraction of practice, you might have multiple body parts. Yeah? So you might build a MIME tree where you have a multi-part alternative thing, just as I just described, plus in addition, let's say an image or something like that, which by default would probably be something that could be human readable. Or not machine readable by itself, right? So the question is, could we then safely assume that, for instance, some sort of filter, AI agent, whatever kind of stuff, would be allowed to whatever auto process or what Ant just mentioned, this kind of thing. So first of all, the wording in the draft was therefore a little bit ambiguous. Yeah? So I tried already to refine that a little bit to say that by the multi-part alternative wrapping, not necessarily the full message will be in a full representation mode, but so there are actually two kinds of full representation. The full representation of the really full message, which the client can derive and act upon, but there might also be the case where only certain subparts of the message are full representation. Consider also just like a reply to such initial example where you add a human readable text to it. Yeah? So this is a case where clients might want to decide a little bit differently on how to deal with such a mail. And I think it's not a big deal in that sense, but it just needs to be clearly distinguished. And probably Arndt's idea is not too bad also to be able to, you know, set that as a top level message header thing. So to avoid that the client needs to go all through the MIME tree in order to find that out. So even if it might sound a little bit theoretic what I just said, I think it's really an important point we need to consider about. And yeah, there was the third point is just a short note. So there was a discussion at Bangkok as well, if we should allow a message to be just machine readable without any multi-part alternative human readable representation, which is currently the main recommendation, because there might be use cases where I definitely will send an email to a known endpoint, which is not a human. And just for clarification, we added also a sentence allowing for that. So, but that's a little bit of a different side point here, but I wanted to mention it. So yeah, as next steps, I think there is still a little bit more improvement required for the wording. So it would probably be especially good if people considering to implement this, maybe clients could cross-read that section and try to make sense of it, and especially with consideration of this kind of aspect here. So we can really bring this in a good and you know, crisp shape. Let's put it like that. Any comments or questions here? Aren't, right? Oh.
No.
What? I'm just nodding. You're on the queue. Okay.
Oh,
Otherwise, Philip.
I'm in the queue still.
yes.
And I think you
I'll kick you
dropped
out.
in while.
Philip?
Yeah, the current proposal for how to deal with the legal footer, as far as I understand, is something like you would have a.
We come to the legal footers in the next slide. So.
Oh, okay. Is this not about the or like the full representation of a partial part of this the MIME tree instead of the top level? I guess. Okay, I'll wait until the next slide.
Okay. I hope at least it's the next slide, but it should be.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah. If nobody. Yeah, right. So this is what Philip was pointing to. So there is one, well, probably a little bit corner case here as well, which we shortly came to discuss in Bangkok. And this is actually email footers or legal footers. So in some legislation, for instance, in Germany, I think in Ireland, I think in France, it's formally required if you're a business entity to add a legal footer with your company information underneath an email. I think most of us have seen that already in practice, even in some other countries, or I mean, it's, I guess, even a best practice for business emails in general, even though it's not legally required. However, in case of the legal requirements, I think this could spoil the idea of having a fully machine readable email, at least I think so, because if we would not have a way to, define or refer to the sender in terms of to the legal information in a structured way, the client in theory, would not be able to fulfill this, and also the sender would not be able to fulfill this legal obligations. So while it sounds a little bit complicated, I think the solution is not that difficult, because there is already in schema.org the possibility for a certain piece of what's called creative work in schema.org to set a publisher, so an entity being responsible for publishing this, and there is actually a type for email message. So I added to the draft a proposal on how a sender, if he or she thinks this is required, could basically add the information about the legal publisher of this email into a structured email for which the sender wants it to be fully machine readable. So yeah, many words, but the idea is actually quite simple. And there's an example in the examples part of the draft, actually.
Yes, Philip Apple. So I think the whole idea of being able to do a full representation of part of the MIME tree really muddies the line between, full representation and a partial representation in general. I understand, you're proposing a top level message header that I guess would specify if it's full or partial. Am I understanding that right?
Well, when I think I didn't understand it perfectly when I said it, but it says the machine readable part is a complete representation of the message. Machine processing is enough for this message. I believe that those two statements are equivalent.
Okay.
So it is practically speaking, it's a full representation marker.
Okay. But okay, so if I see that at the top of the message, but there's a really complicated MIME structure with like various levels of nested alternatives and related and stuff, as a MUA author, it seems complicated to figure out exactly how to extract potentially the several, structured email parts and how they might relate to each other. So I think there's some simplicity about having full representation only be the top level multi-part alternative. And so, for this legal case, I think, what an alternative way to what you have in the draft could be like you have a multi-part alternative at the top with text, HTML, and then a multi-part mix with only structured data parts. And I know, we were chatting about this, and on the forwarding case, you were saying, by having the multi-part mixed at the top with the footer in that multi-part mix, and then the alternative as the other subpart, would allow you on forwarding to strip the header, strip the footer. But that's also kind of weird to me, because if you're stripping the footer, the structured footer part, but you're still forwarding, presumably you're not stripping the footer from the HTML itself, or like it would be weird to me if you're forwarding it and the human readable alternative still has the footer, but then you're stripping the structured footer from the forwarded message.
Yeah, fair point. what did I wanted to comment on? So I think I think we all agree in a way that the full representation thing has its most glory on the full message kind of thing. But probably it's good for the thing which sort of is a little bit open, and I think at least for people reading the draft and not involved in this discussion, we just need to be clear on how to describe this remaining corner cases in a certain way. And for imagination, let's make an example like I sent you a HTML email with a text plain alternative right now, but the person responding to it would just do a plain text response. So now if I have a client being capable of text HTML, actually, what would I render? Would I prefer actually the HTML for the previously multi-part alternative HTML, but then of course use the text where just is the text in that response? It's something somehow up to the client to decide upon, right? So the client can either say, I try to fall back to a version which is available in all body parts here consistently, so just display it all text, but it could also say for the body part which is having HTML, then show that with HTML. I'm actually not sure how this is done right now. It would be an interesting experiment, actually. And so the same idea actually happens as well. So the same thing applies actually also, I think, for the structured data thing. I'm not even sure. I mean, here in the draft, we don't necessarily want to prescribe what a client is supposed to do. Yeah, I think a client should probably still be free to decide upon which of those two choices to opt for. But still, that means that a part of the message, so there might be a multi-part alternative within the message, which still has what we call full representation for that particular body part, whereas that doesn't necessarily apply in that case for the full mail. Maybe we just need to have a second wording for that full message representation thing to make it clearer, and that would already solve the issue. I don't know.
DKG?
Yeah, I don't think I fully understand all the trade-offs here, but from the discussion, it strikes me that the MIME structure itself should give an indication of whether this is full representation or not. And if it does not give that representation, I would be very wary about trusting any other signal that claims that it's full representation. Because of the complexities in the way that legacy clients tend to move stuff around during reply or forward.
Okay, so maybe to rephrase in one sentence, I think the issue here is a little bit that the way we do currently talk about full representation is supposed to be based on multi-part alternative. And in the standard case of multi-part alternative in a message, which is there's just a single multi-part alternative, this is clearly applying to the message as such. But there might be more different cases. You might have a more complex MIME structure where there is not just a single multi-part alternative, but something else. And then, of course, the client would need to, analyze in the whole MIME tree if everything is multi-part alternative machine readable in order to conclude if the whole thing is multi-part alternative machine readable, which is currently probably the case. However, it should probably be clarified. Plus, Arndt made that suggestion to make it easier for the client with that header field, which I understood, DKG, you were a little bit cautioning against because that, of course, might deviate from what you come to conclusion when you parse the MIME tree as such.
So Arndt just reminded me we're a bit short on time, so if we can speed up a little bit.
Right. Even though I think this is one of some, I mean, that would certainly be, if there is still some people with an opinion, it might be worth having that right here because I think all the other points are probably not as, we don't need so much time in the end, actually, probably.
Okay. I don't see a big queue. If anybody wants. Okay. All right. Let's move on.
All right. Okay. That even gets already short. So this is actually the current section 5, which so everything we've discussed so far is within the current MIME structure of an individual mail. The section 5, as it is now, is basically dealing with cases where an email enters or exits the sphere of your mailbox. So like as a reply, a forward, or an update to an existing email. And as for the replies, actually in this version of the draft, I did a lot of elaboration on that. I also decided that it might be worthwhile, or would suggest, to put the 6.2, which is a message flag related to a reply or answering, into it, because it was a little bit artificial. It was separated. However, I also came to the conclusion that this whole aspect of the reply thing, first of all, we only discussed it, I think, at the last meeting, and I think probably a little bit before that. So it's not as well discussed yet. And it's a little bit, in my opinion, also even orthogonal. So you would not need it strictly for a first implementation of, basic SML features like the ones I have shown you in the first slide of this example implementation. So a suggestion might be also for in terms of getting the core draft into a into a final shape, to probably split this out into a separate draft in the meantime or for a later time. And I would like to hear some, I don't know, opinions on that.
I put myself into the queue. Like this. Right. I would be strongly in favor of splitting this into a separate draft and basing it and doing that on top of the core draft, and get the core draft moving so we can work on other aspects.
Funnily enough, I think I disagree, but I'm not sure we need to, initially it seems like editorial and, what is the inner base spec kind of decision. So do we need to decide right now?
Nope.
Okay.
It's just a question of how deeply we want to go through the discussion, and otherwise we could have saved some time probably.
Okay.
But I will happily.
So if we were to split it off, would you like other co-editors to help you with the reply draft?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, let's, I suggest we'll think about this.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Move on right there.
So irrespective of that, there is still this section in the draft, if it gets split out or not. Certainly feedback on that is interesting. So it basically describes, just to make it, I didn't put in here a full example, but it basically describes the case like you received a structured email and you might reply in a structured manner, meaning something like approve or, like a structured representation of certain answers, which makes sense in response to a certain piece of structured data. That's the idea here. And if you go to the next slide, there is a second aspect to that. And this is basically what happens if my answer to that initial, like, let's say I confirm a flight by a structured message in reply to a flight reservation request or something like that. Then, of course, I might want to get an information back if, for instance, I don't know, that flight was canceled or I did something wrong in that kind of response. And we shortly discussed about in Bangkok that it might be helpful to have something like an error message here. This is a little bit related to, there is similar things in a way on a more lower level on message transport in, I think, RFC, I don't remember, where it comes to basically informing the MUA that there is an issue with the message transport.
You mean DSN response?
Yeah, as part of DSN response, there is a dedicated draft actually for, I think, error types in DSN responses. However, this is a little bit different because this is supposed to be probably something to be worked. This DSN response thing is something on the technical level where the mail client needs to deal with, mail topics, whereas this is something where the mail client would need to, an SML informed mail client would need to understand a little bit of the business logic aspects of this, like understanding and maybe even signaling some of these to the user, like telling, okay, you are not the one authorized to confirm this flight or something like that, so that the user can actually take other action in order to achieve the goal. And So that's just for explanation, and I try to come up with an initial categorization of what these kind of errors may mean. Obviously, the first two ones probably more on a syntactical level, not necessarily like something the user by itself could fix, and that probably shouldn't even happen in practice in a well-designed system. All the other states probably might be something where the user might play a role in, for instance, an invalid identifier, like as I said, I respond to a flight reservation which actually doesn't exist for some reason. I do a response which is, not a valid response in terms of the ongoing state, like I already confirmed the flight probably, or I canceled the flight before, so I cannot confirm it now. The authorized case I already mentioned, and another technical one might be just the server for some reason cannot process my request, and again, I need to go another way to confirm my flight. So I think that's already pretty covering a lot of stuff. Probably nothing we can already confirm without some people thinking more about it. There's also a concrete example on how to put this into a response in the draft. So in general, I added a lot of examples at the end of the draft, actually, also in terms of MIME structures. And we are almost done, I think. Yeah.
One comment, I believe that the draft needs to say to whom those messages go. Some of them, when I read the draft, I thought that some of them looked as if they should go to the envelope sender, and some as if they should go to the reply to address.
All right, good point.
Which is, well, an unfortunate mixture.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. All right. There's actually not much to discuss here. We discussed already a couple of times that there might be the case that that there might be an update to information conveyed in a structured email. I think it was Alexei's suggestion there is a supersedes header historically, which could be reused for that. This is in a draft since a while. The only open issue right now is I think that the text is very much written from a recipient case, and I still promise to add a little bit of a sender perspective to that. This is still to be done, but probably not overly complicated.
Okay.
So in my opinion, we don't need to, except.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go on.
Go on. Okay. So finally, now I thought I moved something away from section 6 in that reply thing. So the only thing remaining in section 6 right now is actually the suggestion for both a header field and a flag saying that a mail has structured data inside, similar to a has attachment. One idea here is to give incoming MTAs who already scan the email the possibility to apply their tag, so that downstream processors of that email don't need to repeat the MIME body scanning all over again. This is very similar to what many of you know as the has attachment flag, which I think is currently not formally part of an RFC, but is an informal standard and was discussed on IETF mailing lists. So I think it makes sense.
It's actually part of the draft in Mailmaint.
Ah, okay. Good to know. Which one? Sorry.
There is a draft of flags, a new.
Is it for this week or on the agenda?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Okay.
I think it's actually past last call now.
Okay, I totally missed that. I'm sorry for that. Okay. Anyway, so one question here is actually the header field required? So there were some arguments in the past that probably, that can deviate and so on, and probably the flag is a more honest and controllable part, which part of I agree upon. The header field currently is still in the draft. A second aspect here is related to the discussion we had a couple of minutes ago. Is has structured data sufficient, or would we need something like a second flag, like has structured data full representation? So if that previous processing step already came to the conclusion that this is a full representation, entire full representation email, if we need probably second flag for that, and I would probably after the discussion we had agree yes.
Second flag seems overkill, but if
why do you think it's
would the client do something different knowing this?
Yes, I mean it may not. I mean, remember, client might not just be a human readable MUA, but it might also be CIF filters or whatever.
Okay.
And you might want to design in the future maybe some CIF filters which say, if this is a full representation email and X, then I'm allowed as a CIF filter to go on with something. I think that's a valid.
Our current discussion about the variety of MIME structures made me think that whoever processing it still need to figure out whether it's full representation or not. So you cannot just, I'm not entirely convinced that claiming that it is full representation would always help. But
well, in my understanding, and also of the semantics of has attachments, the idea is that everything of this processing is happening on your side. So also in has attachment, you trust your incoming MTA to do the decision that there is an attachment in that message, and all underlying and all downstream tools and so on trust on that decision and don't do the re-evaluation by itself. And along this argumentation, the same would, in my opinion, apply to determining if the message is entirely in a full representation state, right?
Okay, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Right. Philip?
Philip from Apple. I think a second flag might be useful, not so much to differentiate full representation, but to communicate whether the MUA can, automatically process it and discard it or whatever. Because I think there's full representation cases where you still want to display it to the user, right?
I don't get your distinction actually. Isn't it the same? Why do you think it's two different things?
Because I think there are cases where, like, for the music example, right? Mm-hmm. I may want to send, or a rich link example, I may want to send that as the only thing in the message, and there's no other HTML wrapped around that. Right. So that's not necessarily, and that's different from like the one-time codes where, the MUA may want to just automatically discard that.
Interesting point. So you're actually making another distinction here, I guess, right? Because just to clarify, when we talk about full representation, and probably that's bad wording from a non-native speaker, it means semantic representation. It doesn't mean like visual representation or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, currently we don't make any assumption about distinguishing that music sharing thing from the authorization code.
Sure.
So that would be another kind of
exactly. So I agree with you. The full representation is a full semantic representation, but there are some things that should still be presented to the user where in comparison to some things that are really intended for the MUA to consume. And like, so those two examples. So I think that the full representation versus partial representation really needs to be inferable from the MIME structure itself. I think having a really clear, the partial representation cases, I think it's fine if we tolerate all variety of MIME structures, but a really simple top-level distinction for what's a full representation should, like DKG was saying, if you're trying to communicate that with the header, but it's some really complicated MIME, I can see security issues coming from that, and also just practically, it's hard for me to reconcile like. The header is telling me it's a full representation, but I don't understand how to extract the actual semantic parts from this complicated MIME structure. So I think, so I think, like you were saying, that the full representation should be telling you that it's a full semantic representation of the message, and the other header would tell you, if that message is something that's potentially only meant to be used by the client and doesn't need to be displayed at all.
So one short question. So I totally agree with your points. The question is, wouldn't it be sufficient for the, let's say, processing stack on the client side to make this determination on, if to show it to the user or not in terms of full representation cases on the actual type of the structured data itself? There might even be cases I might want to say CIF rules, every whatever music I get in should automatically fed to my music player. I think this is actually a user decision to a certain extent, or not something probably the sender should prescribe, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It could be part of the definition for each of the potential things that are being transmitted. I think there's also been previous discussion in the past that I think like if this flag were to exist, it would need to be kind of a hint, and ultimately the receiving MUA would have to make that decision anyway. So yeah, I can buy that argument that maybe a second flag is not needed at all in that case then.
I mean, certainly. So this is actually a final comment from my side to that. But I think this is actually an interesting corner case where it comes to how far do we want to prescribe in the draft or give hints to clients to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So I think it's very valuable that you guys can give some real, what would you like to see here, things here from really thinking through how you would process it here, because this is a little bit like what we can't anticipate just from the draft. And if you say it's really, really useful for this and that reason, I think it would be fine to add it here. And probably we need to iterate once more against that in order to find finally out, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so just to know that we are over time. So I think if you want to continue with this, you're sacrificing part of your vacation presentation. Okay. Do you want to respond to this quickly? Okay.
Daniel, I think the has attachment flag is mostly used for web UI so that they can show a paperclip or something. I don't think any clients that actually download all the email anyway, let more do syncing, use the has attachment flag. And since structured data is more for those, like I don't think web clients are going to use structured data in that way. I don't think that flag actually helps anyone.
Why wouldn't web clients don't do this?
I mean, they would probably show it once you click on the email and then you have downloaded it anyway. Like, I think the has attachments is more for showing a list of things. No,
in the scan, in the scan list of the mailbox, you show a extra icon.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see.
So first of all, I think you're right.
You would use that flag. That's just what I'm saying.
Right.
But if others want it, I'm not opposed to it.
Okay.
We kind of lost track of the queue here. Oh. Sorry? Yeah, but it was I who got missed in the queue. Daniel is after. It was it was Philip.
My fault. I'll let him in. Sorry. Next in the queue is Arndt.
So right, I will suggest wording to say everything in the MIME structure. And I think that a flag may be useful for some power constrained, battery operated, portable, blah, 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 but it's pretty much useless for everything else because they're going to look anyway. And the size of an email message today is not a big problem if you have a fiber connection. So flag only for what mobiles might need, really. Also a comment on web UIs. I have seen a beautiful web UI that uses structured mail and does really quite well. Does not just display lists. In the list of inbound messages, you also see lists. If there are any parcel shipping messages there, the list, the status of the messages is, no, the status of the parcels is shown along with the list of messages. It's magic. So web UIs do use this. Next is
GKG.
Just on this flags question, I feel like this discussion is a little bit strange because Philip was talking about headers, which I think are distinct from flags. My understanding of the flag is we're talking about something that the MTA uses to identify messages one way or another, to make some claim about the message, which is maybe something that's unknowable for the MTA. For instance, an end-to-end encrypted message could have the properties, once you've decrypted it, that this flag would indicate. So when I'm receiving this flag, I don't know, first off, if I see the flag, I don't know that it will be correct. I still have to get the message and reason about it. And if I don't see the flag, then I also don't know whether the lack of flag is correct. Either I could be in a situation where I'm dealing with a mail transport agent that's offering me the message that doesn't know about the flag, or it could be that the message is just encrypted and the mail transport agent, as expected, cannot interpret it and won't know. So these flags really are advisory at best.
Okay. Bron, and then
Yeah, I would agree that the flags are advisory. That would be something I would tend to set on delivery if I could determine it as a server author. And working as a client, the value of having something like this, partly it makes it easy to display. If there's any value in displaying has structured data, I don't know whether there is. Does the user care whether the data is structured or not? That's probably the main question. It's very useful for being able to search and being able to filter and say, just give me everything with structured data so I can download that and do whatever parsing I want to do, prioritize downloading it. Sure, it's a hint. Sure, if your server is a hostile force that you're fighting against, then it's not going to be much use. But hopefully your server is cooperating with you, and maybe you've got a client that has decrypted the message and said, oh, this has got structured data. I'll set the keyword on it so that the next client can tell that as well. And hopefully your clients are well-behaved and trustworthy.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it.
That's it.
That was a yes in favor of registering it, even if it's not.
Okay.
Might as well reserve the space.
Right.
I still feel we need to talk a little bit more about use cases, but like if people think they can use it for something, it doesn't have to be for display purposes, for any automated thing that you can based on it then.
Meta question as a draft editor is, as this use case is something to extensively elaborate in the draft itself, or is it more for internal discussion and then we put the result in the draft? I mean, some of the things we discussed are quite extensive. So do we need one page on all of the rationale for this?
Short version. I got a feeling, I don't know. I hope it's not just me proxying, I got a feeling that people are still a bit confused about the purpose of how it's going to be used. So I think narrowing down on purpose, and it might be like one use case or more than one use case,
That was not my question. My question was, how elaborate does it need to be in the draft, or is it more like a discussion we should take on the list and then put the result of that in the draft?
Yes, you don't need to repeat the whole discussion in the draft.
Okay.
You just want to distill, the specific once we settle on what exactly it means.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
All right.
Fine. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you missed the final slide.
Well,
Okay, it's fine. It was the summary.
we're a bit, it's useful, but we're over time. So let's just seriously over time.
No, that's not it. Oh,
That
did
was
I?
63 minutes.
Yeah, okay. I'm so sorry.
So,
Yeah.
bye. See you later.
Trust and security, very nice draft. My close friend Alexei here will request adoption in about 5 minutes. The draft contains 3 things. May have to drop one of them. What kind of security concerns do we have? Which is strictly a discussion of what parsers currently do with this kind of email, even if it's not JSON-LD. The second discusses trust in more philosophical matters and whether to do automatic processing or not. Next. We first Hans-Jörg, then I, after I took that draft, chose a fairly descriptive approach. talk more about what running code does than what running code ought to do. This is a decision for the editor or for the working group. I'm in favor of being descriptive. I like running code, even if it isn't what one might wish. If I don't hear any strong disagreement, then we all agree. And next slide, please.
You just triggered your co-chair.
No, go.
I think this is fine, but so you give, like, for example, Gmail structured data. If what we end up doing, the end result of SML in this working group differs in behavior from Gmail structured data, you want to describe what we do as opposed to what Gmail does.
I want the draft. I want the trust and security aspects to describe pretty much what Gmail, Office 365, Hans-Jörg, tell me, what is the name of the German provider with the beautiful parcel tracking? WebD, right. I want to describe what they do. They have running codes. I want to describe what a lot of programs do with calendar invitations, which I regard as structured data. If there are any differences, there are minor differences, then I want to describe the running code overall. That includes Gmail. Gmail is not the only software that handles calendar invitations automatically, but it is an important one. So I think that the draft should describe running code, including the most important one, which is Gmail. Does that trigger my co-chair?
Yes. I think I need to read the draft and see like,
excellent suggestion.
I suspect that SML will do what other systems do, so it will not matter in the end. If you're doing a comparison of like SML does this, another system does that,
nope.
I think that is okay. But if you are describing what known system do, this is a different type of document with different scope.
Yeah, no, I think that what the document does and what it should do is to say that when you display something or when you handle something like calendar invitation, these are the approaches that current code uses to decide whether to do it automatically or punt to user, or punt to human.
Okay.
A lot of them use the user's contact list as a factor, for example, including Gmail, and I expect including all SML implementations. But purely descriptive, there's not a single must anywhere.
Okay. I think we'll have to have a discussion offline, but I probably should reread the latest version.
Oh, excellent.
So I'm a little bit concerned about the scope, but it's possible that it wouldn't matter.
Right. Next slide.
Okay.
There's a fairly detailed list of what kind of security problems receivers may have. This is intended to bring each type to implementers' notice, so people don't happen to overlook an entire class of security problems. They are not described in a lot of detail, but they are described. And there are a couple of examples from running code. Next. Oh, yes, if people can think of more, then there should be more. Next. The question of Whether to do display or automatic processing is something that we should perhaps move to the main draft entirely. However, it is a matter of trust. It is a decision to be made partly based on trust. The current document talks a lot about whether you trust someone enough to act automatically or not, whether to display structured data or not. I personally don't really see any situation in which you trust the sender enough to display HTML, but not enough to display JSON LD. However, the Hans-Jörg added that at start, and it still is there. Any comments on that? Then next, and we'll manage this in the next 9 minutes. Privileged senders is a big thing. Several mail recipients regard all user contacts as privileged senders and will act if something comes from a contact. Some reject everything that's unsigned, and some regard privileged senders if the MUA author has a contract with the sendee. I'm not awfully happy about that. It's a big problem for things like WordPress. If you have a WordPress site, then you are not WordPress. WordPress might have a contract with senders, but you as one of the 800 million WordPress sites are not going to have a contract with anyone. This is something we've discussed offline, kind of offline in Dublin. Next slide. And I have a suggestion, which is not at all controversial. First, if you have trusted if the user has trusted someone, then that is a reason for the software to trust that someone. Sorry about my voice. This happens a lot when you have a contractual relationship between the user and someone. For example, Amazon sends countless messages about your orders. One might even, I'm not going to write that, but one might even see reasons to file subsequent messages straight where they belong. And the second thing to trust, next, is payment processors. There are a fairly small number of payment processors, and they send mail about many of the things we care about. If you buy a ticket to something, you're going to get the ticket perhaps as a QR code from the vendor. You're also going to get a message from Stripe or PayPal or something. Both of the messages contain a 30-digit code which could be used to link those two messages. I think this is a reasonable way to get. I think this is a reasonable way to implement a transition from straight to structured mail and actually trust structured mail. If you get an email message from PayPal with which the MUA has a contract, then matching the transaction data, matching the transaction ID, it becomes reasonable to just pick the ticket out of the other message and handle it automatically. Put it in a wallet, do whatever. The reason I think this is worth doing, this is controversial, right, is that there are few payment processors and they are vetted. We have maybe a 5-digit number of museums and other things that issue tickets. We have only a 3-digit number of payment processors. Any comments on this? Delete it, Daniel? Okay.
This is an interesting observation. I think baking this into the spec has some consequences that we might not be super comfortable with. For one thing, it creates a barrier to entry for other payment processors being started because they won't be blessed in whatever way we're describing here, unless you mean that an individual has a payment processor that they've already manually chosen to trust. If we create a short list of acceptable payment processors, that actually makes it harder for other payment processors to enter the space, which is a consolidation effect. I would be a little bit wary about that. You mentioned here long transaction ID. I think what you mean here is high entropy transaction ID. Length alone doesn't seem sufficient because the process that you're looking to do is you're looking to use that transaction ID as an unguessable code that would allow anyone to trigger operation on structured data if they happen to know that code. So it needs to not just be long, it needs to be high entropy. And I don't know whether those payment processors guarantee high entropy. They may just have a sequential 30-digit code, or one that's set up in some certain way. Maybe I'll be able to guess the subsequent code if I've seen one from before. And you frame trust here as a sort of binary decision, and I'm not sure that makes sense. So, for example, if I trust, if I purchase a ticket, I might trust that sender to set up a calendar entry for me for that ticket once. But it doesn't mean that I trust it to set up arbitrary calendar entries for me in the future, just because it happens to know a code that I've retained at some point. And I don't want it to set up a calendar entry for, let's say, a repeating event that happens every Tuesday at 2 a.m. and is designed to set off an alarm on my personal device. So the idea of trusted automated handling is not just a Boolean thing. And I don't know how to grapple with that.
Right. A couple of comments. One, it has to be a Boolean thing in some sense. If your choice as a MUA is whether to send the ticket off to a wallet or not, because you have to either do it or not. Two, trust generally is not Boolean like that. For each action that you may take or not, you have to make a Boolean choice. But different actions can have different thresholds. Whether to display at all, for example, may have a much lower threshold than whether to add a calendar entry automatically. Third point, agree completely about the about trust this time as opposed to trust forever, and about the difference between lots of digits and high entropy.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe I don't know whether it's a good idea or not. Maybe also expired trust in some cases.
Maybe also
expired trust. You
right.
would trust it within a certain period of time. The other thing I was I'm in the queue. Stating the obvious, I'm getting lots of spam messaging saying that PayPal just paid $1 billion on my behalf to this, company. So this obviously needs to talk about how this interacts with anti-spam and making sure that
the text I put in says basically, if you think that you have a bona fide message from PayPal with a transaction ID and another message with the same transaction ID with something like a calendar entry, then the temporal closeness is a reason to give additional trust.
Right.
I do agree that we should not trust anything that says PayPal, but rather if you have a PayPal message that you consider bona fide.
Okay.
Hans-Jörg.
Hans-Jörg. 3 short remarks. First, I think for the given example with the wallet, I would slightly disagree. This is binary in that case, because I could imagine you could still, if in doubt, have some human interaction. Like, do you really want to add this to the wallet? It's just one example, but probably doesn't matter too much. Second thing is, I sort of find that idea interesting. I think we probably need a little more of an example here, because I didn't yet fully understand like what would be the requirements of either party. So, would one use, is there an existing ID already in PayPal, or is that something PayPal would need to add? What would that entail for the shop sending the subsequent email? I think I tried to look in our own, we do use PayPal transactions by our own. I'm not sure I found an ID already that would be suitable to that. So these mechanics would be interesting to see if this is mainly based on something existing, or we would propose something to PayPal sending emails out to add on. That's my second point. Third point is partially referring to something on an earlier slide when it comes, and it's probably related a little bit here as well. So when it comes to all that automated processing, I think we have at least a little bit of an overlap here with all these novel, fancy new agent transaction stuff. So there was actually a side meeting on this agent-to-agent interaction stuff yesterday, and I only visited half of that, but there might be some work in the IETF coming forward here. So might be there is some whatever overlap or inspiration we can draw from that, depending on how quickly that puts forward.
Right. Yes, there is a long transaction ID in the messages from the payment processors I know. You tend to overlook it, but it's there. It's the boring part of the message.
So it would probably help discussion or understanding of people if we could really make a real world example or fake example.
Right. I think that it's for something that cannot have a contract, it's reasonable to just decide which payment processes are okay. This creates a barrier, but I'd prefer to have a barrier to entry on payment processors. Banks already impose that, rather than have a barrier to entry for websites, of which there are many more. I think that people who send tickets need in some sense to send structured email. MUAs can do a little bit of machine reading and recognize the ID in PayPal pattern matching. It's a workable transition.
Okay. You have last slide.
Yep. There's a bit of talk in the draft about how trustworthy something must be in order to do different kinds of things. It doesn't go terribly into detail. It's not clear to me that it needs to. To me, it's obvious that if you're a server and you consider doing some automatic processing and then automatically archiving the message so it never will be in the user's inbox, you need to be fairly strict about the sender. If your choice is whether to display something, you can be a lot more flexible. At least we're not over time.
1 minute. If you want 1 minute summary of vacation, okay. So, all right, thank you.
Fine. Oh, adoption, yes or no?
Okay, shall I try? Are people logged in into the tool? Shall I try? Yes. So the question is security trust document ready for working group adoption now? I just want to poll people to see how you feel about this. It doesn't mean it's perfect. And, I know Arndt suggested some new, possibly controversial ideas. It doesn't mean that they will stay in the document. It just means that is it a good base for working on this in the working group? Wow. I think I probably. Okay. 10 more seconds. Okay, so not super indicative. We have, yeah, we have more than 6 people and, more than 8 people in the room, and 6 people think it's ready and 2 thinks it's not. So I will start adoption call anyway. It's a required document for the working group to produce anyway. So let's see. And if people, because we are out of time, I'm not going to ask people to say why if they're in the room, why they don't think it's ready. But
no opinion.
Oh,
0 no.
Sorry, never mind. Anyway, during adoption call, just a reminder for people to be, if you don't think the document is ready for adoption, be specific about what needs to improve in it for it to be ready for adoption. And also full reviews are also helpful. All right, thank you very much. We have a spare slide on vacation notices, which we haven't discussed. If people want to read it at their own leisure, they can.
Right, I need to edit that.
I need to prove that I'm a director of Argument LLC so that anyone's up to date. He's heard that 80 companies have that, and I can't bring it.
Like Roman ones.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do it or not. Yeah.
So, you got my comment about the survey of existing. It's like if we choose to SML to deviate from what we does, it's okay to say we deviate from Google. And this is the reason why.
Yeah.
It's not okay to just say, well, Google does this. You need to kind of, the focus is on what SML does.
Right.
And
Well, okay. No, I think that
I think in
for
practice,
these decisions, SML should try to match what at least some current code does.
unless we have